Hello, everybody. Thank you, Buddha House, for having me. I also would have preferred to come in person, but as we know, life is impermanent. Things are impermanent. Things can change in every moment. Lama Zopa tells us so many times that, we can think, oh, tomorrow I'm going to do this, tomorrow I'm going to do that, but we do not know. Life can change like that. And we have heard it many times, and I know that every time you think, oh, it cannot change completely. But I think now with what is happening in the world, things have changed dramatically for everyone. And it is good to see that you in Adelaide are already opening up again and you can have people coming to your compound. But I'm also sure that many people have experienced the comfort of not having to travel and staying home and watching the teachings from there. So maybe we're going to be teaching in different ways in the future, or maybe we can offer different kinds of things to people due to the experiences that we are having right now. We're going to speak about the art of happiness, and I thought before we start with focusing on mind, doing a very small meditation to bring the mind to the present moment. And so whether you're in the Gompa or whether you're home, make sure that you sit comfortable. And maybe you want to take a few deep breaths. And with every out breath, you let go. You let go of whatever happened in the past. You let go whatever keeps you worrying about the future. And then think the best way to deal with what happened in the past. And the best way to deal with our worries about what might come in the future is to listen to Buddha's teachings. When we hear about the Dharma, then naturally the delusions in the mind, they will lessen. The mind will calm down, become more peaceful. And our inner wisdom and compassion surface more easily. So allow your mind to be fully in the present moment. And by focusing on our body or on our breath, the mind is naturally in the present moment. So just be aware of either your body or your breath. And then we can set a positive motivation for listening to the teachings or this talk by thinking that whatever benefit is going to come from listening today, that you're going to dedicate it to the welfare of all living beings. And then we can start. I see some more people came to the bumper. That's nice. So the art of happiness. We all want to be happy, right? We all human beings, but also all animals. And in Buddhism, we say all sentient beings, no matter what body you have, even the bodies that we cannot see. All sentient beings have the same wish, wanting to be happy and wanting to be free of suffering. But how do we do that? Because although we all want it, we have to say that somehow we are not sure how to find happiness. We're not sure how to do it. You know, sometimes you can think, oh, that brought me happiness last time, so I'll engage in the same action, and then you do that, but this time it doesn't give you the same kind of feeling. How come? Or you look at, you know, you have an idea, if I'm going to do this and this, then I'm going to be very happy. And so you put all the causes and conditions together in order to do that. And then you engage in the action, and you think, it's not really bringing me happiness, you know. But it looked so happy from, like, it looked as if it was going to bring you happiness. But then the moment you get it, it's not really there. And so, and sometimes we engage in actions that we think they're going to bring us happiness, and they bring us the opposite. They bring us suffering. And so even if we have been here in this life for so many years, that's still a puzzle that we all have. How do we do that? Finding happiness, being happy, being free of suffering. And even if you know some things about Buddhism, you know about creating the causes for happiness, stop creating the causes for suffering, then to really generate happiness in the present moment, happiness when you have difficult times, that is still an art. That is not something that comes because you have the knowledge about Buddhist teachings, right? Then you still need to learn how to apply that. And I think it is a little bit similar to how to bake a cake, you know, or how to cook a nice meal. Somebody gives you the recipe and says, oh, this is really, really great, you know, put it. And so you buy all the ingredients, and you can read how you have to put it together, and you do that, but it doesn't taste that great. You know, the meal that you had with your friend actually tasted much better than the meal that you made, and you use the same recipe. How come? You know, so what is your friend doing that makes her meal so much nicer than your meal while you're using the same recipe? So that's the art of cooking, the art of baking. You know, some people, we say they have it in their fingers. Do you say it like that in English? You know, they know how to do it. They can make something delicious from everything. And other people, no matter what they do, it doesn't really taste good, right? So how do we find that art? So I think we need to have both. You know, you need to have the ingredients. You need to have the recipe, how you put them together. And then you need to start developing the art. Right? For me, these are two different things, but they work together. So let's start at looking at the ingredients, the tools that we have in Buddhism that can help us to find more happiness. And in Buddhism, we can talk about two different aspects. And sometimes they're called the two wings of a bird. We have tools that apply to the way how we see things. And we have tools with respect to our attitude. So when we apply the tools with respect to how we see things, then we're talking about developing our wisdom mind. And when we apply tools with respect to our attitude, we are developing our compassion. And so in order to have a balanced mind, we need both, like the two wings of a bird. Compassion without wisdom is like a blind man, not knowing where he's going. You know, sometimes we say stupid compassion, but that sounds a little bit rude. But you know what I mean, no? It's like there are people that have such good heart and they say yes to everything, and they do whatever they ask for, and then at a certain point there is the danger of having a burnout because you do not know how to say no, or you do not know how to skillfully use compassion so that it becomes a force that can keep going. And wisdom without a compassion, then Zopa would say there is still the self-cherishing mind. And the self-cherishing mind is seen as the root of all our problems. You know, our self-centered attitude, believing that I am more important than you, believing that my happiness is more important than your happiness. So in order to have a balanced mind, in order to really develop our potential, we need to develop both wings, both wisdom and compassion. So if we look at the wisdom, then we can see what kind of ingredients do we have in Buddhism. And Buddhism says, as ordinary sentient beings, we are confused. We do not see the nature of reality. We cannot see things as they really are. And I'm sure if you have heard some Buddhist teachings, you have heard about this. Right? According to Buddhism, we all have an ignorance that exists out of a not knowing and out of a distorted knowing with respect to reality. And that ignorance that is like a veil that we have in front of us. We cannot really see what is there. Right? When we look with our eyes into reality, we believe whatever we see. When people tell us stories, we believe what we hear. Sometimes we might say, oh, I don't believe that person. But in general, when we hear things, that is what we take as reality. And we believe that how things appear to our mind, that they exist in actuality. So Buddhism says we are confused, or we cannot see reality as it is in two ways, with respect to the ultimate nature of how things exist and with respect to the conventional nature. And I'll try to explain that a little bit. If we look at how things appear to us, you know, when we see a person, that person appears to us as an independent, autonomous entity, as a single thing, right? I see Judy and I see one person. But what really appears to my eyes is actually trillions of cells and all kinds of parts. But somehow my mind makes an image that it is just one thing. It's just Judy, one person. I do not see all the parts. I do not see all the trillions of cells. I do not see what is underneath the skin. But what, you know, the cells, they all appear to my eyes. But somehow my mind sees only one thing. Weird, huh? And so then the Judy appears to me as a person standing in and of herself, like she doesn't depend upon anything, like, you know, for instance, like she's not changing. Judy has been like this always. Oh yeah, I remember, Judy. You haven't changed in the last couple of years. Right? That's what we say. Even if we see somebody after 10 years, we say, oh, you haven't changed at all. But with our intellectual mind, we know, well, that person has changed. Maybe even with our eyes, you know, that person has changed. But somehow within our mind, we quickly make it, you know, adjust to the other image, to the new image, and say, you haven't changed. So then Buddhism says, although things are impermanent by nature, although things are changing moment to moment, somehow they appear to us as being much more permanent than they exist in actuality. So then they say things appear to be permanent to us. If we arrive in the Gompa, we think the Gompa always has been there. And the Gompa always was like that. And then you have to think and think, oh, no, it wasn't like that. Before it was a church, and then we had to renovate it. And then we had to do all this work. And there was all these changes happening. But then once it's ready, that becomes the Gompa. And the Gompa is always the same. So although the mind looks at something impermanent, our eyes look at something impermanent, in the mind, we create a permanent image of that. And that we project onto whatever we see. And then somehow we believe that what we project is actually coming from the object, is actually existing in the object or existing in the person. So when I see Judy, I see one person. In my mind, I make from all these trillions of cells and all these parts of the body, I make an idea of one person, and I project that onto Judy. And then I believe that what I project on it is actually coming from Judy. That, as if that is existing from what Judy is. And I'm not realizing that that is coming from the mind. And so we do that with all things. You know, everything that exists is impermanent, is existing out of many atoms, is existing out of many parts. And they all appear to the mind. They all appear to our eyes when we see it. But then the mind changes that and creates an image of a singular thing and projects that image onto the object or onto the person. And then we believe that that thing out there that exists out of trillions of cells or atoms or actually exists as a single thing. Independent of the mind, independent of causes and conditions, independent on all the parts that it exists. So that is something that we all do. That is what we call our beginningless ignorance. And that is the root problem that we have. It's the root of all the problems that we have. So what can we do in Buddhism? What tools do we have in order to counteract that? That was a little bit a difficult part of the teaching, but what it is about, what tools do we have in Buddhism? You know, what can help us to find more happiness? And so if we're going to apply that to the ultimate nature of reality, we can, for instance, start thinking about how things are in actuality impermanent. When we see our mind believing strongly in something or getting attached to something, we can reflect the impermanence. When we are in a relationship, you know, and we are very much in love with the person, we of course want the person to stay forever with us. But there's going to be a day that you're going to part, right? Whether that is in this life or at the end of this life. And normally we do not want to think about that. But if you start thinking about the impermanence and start having peace with impermanence, you can see that that will be, maybe you can see that that could be an antidote or a help with attachment that you have in the mind. If you are very attached to certain things that you have in your house, you know, whatever has come into existence, there is going to be a moment that it fades out of existence. If you have something really beautiful, you can think, well, this might not last forever. You know, it might break, it might fall, it might be taken away from me. But today I have it, and today I enjoy having it. But I remember that one day it is going to fall apart or it's going to break. And so when you know that, when you contemplate like that, then the moment that it happens, you say, yeah, I knew that that was coming. Right? So we have the tool of impermanence. That is one of the ingredients that can help with the art of happiness. And then the other tool is that we realize the empty nature of all things. And maybe that's a little bit difficult topic to go through in a public talk, but that independent entity that we experience in all things, in all persons, thinking that that entity is not there in actuality, you know, is a very, very powerful antidote to the mind that grasps at things, at persons. That doesn't mean that things do not exist, you know. If I say Judy is empty of what we say true existence or inherent existence, that doesn't mean that Judy doesn't exist. But Judy doesn't exist in the way it appears to me. Judy appears to me as that independent, unitary, permanent person, but in actuality, such a person doesn't exist. Judy is impermanent, exists out of many, many, many parts, and is dependent upon many things. Also my mind. So I can think about that entity that I perceive is not there, or I can think, how does Judy exist? You know, how many times do we have expectations of people that we think, you know, that person is going to do this and this, or say this and this, or it's going to be there, and then something happens, or what you expected is not there. The better we understand emptiness, and the better we understand that things arise in dependence, the less expectations we will have that are not in accordance with reality. Having expectations and being disappointed is one of the biggest sufferings that we have, no? We project, oh, this is going to happen, and then it doesn't happen. I'm so disappointed. And then you're miserable. So reflecting on the nature of things, on the nature of things itself, but also on the nature of events, on the nature of life, on the nature of whatever arises, you know, will help to let go of false expectations. So that is how we use the wisdom in terms of the ultimate nature of reality. And then Buddhism says, well, we also don't really understand how the conventional nature of reality exists. And that is quite logical, you know, because for us, we have one reality, which is the reality that we see, feel, and hear. That is for us the only reality that is there. That is reality, right? So, but if Buddhism says, well, actually, that is not a real reality. That's not the ultimate reality of things. And we learn that we cannot see the ultimate reality of things, then most likely we have mistakes in the way we perceive conventional reality as well. True? That makes sense? So where is our confusion on the level of conventional reality? One confusion that we have is, according to Buddhism, that we do not really know what happiness is and we don't really know what suffering is. What we call happiness is, according to Buddhism, actually in the nature of suffering. And so I'll try to explain that a little bit. If we talk about happiness, then we're talking about pleasurable experiences. True? When we feel something that is pleasurable, then we say, I'm happy. And that can have many gradations. You know, sometimes the happiness is more fulfilling than other times, but it is in general when pleasurable experiences arise. And so when displeasure arises or suffering feelings arise, then we say, no, I'm not happy, I'm suffering. And what the Buddha says is actually both experiences are in the same nature. So for us, we have one type of experience, pleasant experiences, that is happiness, and the unpleasant experiences is unhappiness. We like to have more of these pleasant experiences, right? This is what we are trying to create all the time, more of these experiences. So how do we do that? Wanting more comes from attachment. Oh, I want more of that. That is going to make me happy. And what we want is we want less of the unpleasant experiences. And in order to have that, we use our aversion. And in dependence on that aversion, we can use anger or, you know, other negative emotions in order to separate from something. And so if we look into our life, that is what we are doing the whole time. I want more of the pleasure. I want less of the suffering. And whatever we are doing is, I shouldn't say that for everyone, but in general, especially if you have never listened to teachings, then I could say whatever you're doing is focused on having more of the pleasurable experiences and having less of the suffering. True? And the Buddha says, well, your activity within these two realms of experiences are actually all of the same nature. And while you want to have more pleasure and while you want to have less suffering, because you use your attachment and your aversion to do it, you're actually creating more causes for suffering. And so, you know, we become like little rats going around in a wheel, trying to get out of suffering. But by doing that, actually creating more and more. So what is pleasure according to Buddhism? You know, why is that in the nature of suffering? And what Buddhism says is, you know, when do we experience pleasure? And you can look into your own experience. If you, for instance, you know, this beautiful weather outside and you have been inside and you have been working hard and you say, oh, I really want to go outside for a walk in the sun, you know, I love to feel the sun. And then you go outside and you're in the sun. And the moment you go in the sun, you feel like, wow, this is fantastic. The pleasure, that is the biggest pleasure is coming from that. And then you are in the sun and maybe you're walking or working or laying or whatever you're doing. At a certain point, you're getting hot. And you think, oh man, I'm getting hot. I go back inside, into the shade. And so the moment you go into the shade, you feel this relief. Oh, this is nice, right? That is the pleasure that we experience. And then, we can continue the story. When you sit longer in the shade, at a certain point, it becomes chilly. You want to go back into the sun. And so this is what we are doing all the time. We're sitting, and then we're getting tired, and we get up, and then we're walking, and then we're wanting to sit down again. And, and so what Buddhism says is the pleasure is actually the moment that the suffering of one activity is finishing. And the suffering of the next activity starts to begin. That moment we call pleasure. These moments are our happy moments. And we are chasing these moments all the time. So what is happiness according to Buddhism? According to Buddhism, real happiness is, of course, the pleasurable experiences, that is part of happiness. And if you want to experience more of these pleasurable experiences, you need to know how to create the causes for them. But then the real happiness that is has a nature of being stable, has a nature of being peaceful, calm, being satisfied. That pleasure, that is not pleasure, that is happiness. That happiness is a freedom of all the delusions. It is a freedom of attachment and aversion and all the delusions that come from that. So Buddhism says, don't use your attachment and aversion to create all these experiences, but apply methods so that you find freedom from that attachment and aversion. Because once the mind is free of attachment and aversion and all the delusions that come with that, there is the happiness that comes with that freedom has such a different quality than any pleasure that you experience within samsara. And that happiness that you experience when there is freedom from the delusions, that happiness is stable in the sense that it doesn't depend upon causes and conditions. You do not have to do anything for that. Which actually means that happiness is part of our innate mind. That is part of our mind. That is our natural state. And so what we are doing with our mind, running after things or trying to avoid things, that is actually disconnecting us from our nature. That is actually disconnecting us from our real happiness. So what Buddhism is focused upon when we try to prepare our mind for seeing the things as they really are, we do that by lessening the delusions. So when we'll talk about that on Tuesday, maybe Thursday night, about how we go about from this condition where we are in right now to the mind that is free of all that turmoil that is going on. Because the way our mind works at the moment, it's not so easy to really become free of the delusions, because everything that we are doing is coming from the same place. Right? I'm trying to do it better this time, but I'm still using the same kind of energy. And so I engage in the same mistakes over and over again. So we have to find ways to get ourselves out of that loop that we keep repeating. So at the moment, our happiness is when I get what I want, and when I'm free of what I don't want. Well, the happiness that we try to achieve is the happiness that, you know, doesn't really get affected by what you have and what you don't have. So when good things happen, that's good. But when bad things happen, that's good too. The mind becomes more stable. The mind becomes less affected by temporary things that happen. And so that doesn't mean that we don't feel anymore, or that doesn't mean that we don't feel the attachment and aversion, we don't feel the sadness, we don't feel the suffering, we still feel all that. But we are not so tempted to engage in, oh, I really don't want that, or I really want to go for that. You know, you can see, well, it is impermanent, and it doesn't have any real substance, and it is, you know, when my karma is ripe, when the time is ripe for me, the things will happen. Your mindset becomes different. So then another thing that we do not know is we don't really know the causes of happiness, right? Where is happiness coming from? Where is suffering coming from? Suddenly it happened, right? Suddenly there was this virus. How did that happen? For Lama Zopa, it's very easy, right? He has said so many times, you Westerners, if you would know karma, you would pull out your hairs looking at the activities that you are engaging in. But you think it is all okay because you don't know karma. But there's going to be a day that you're going to get that insight, that you're going to regret so much what you have been doing in your life. Right? He has been warning us for many years. But we think, how did that happen? Right? So that is not knowing where happiness comes from, not knowing where suffering comes from. If we know that happiness comes from not harming others, if happiness comes from benefiting others, and suffering comes from harming others, you know, then we can just look into the actions that we are doing, and maybe not individually, you know, but as a collective. Look what we do with the animals, how attached we are to eating them, for instance. You know, so Lama Zopa said the best thing to do is if we would stop eating fish, especially fish, but also meat, because we create so much suffering, and that suffering is going to come back one day to us. You know, and maybe the virus is a result of that. I don't know, you know, I'm just repeating what he says. I cannot see the workings of karma. So learning about karma, learning about cause and effect. How do we create causes for happiness? What we do is we are a little bit obsessed with how we feel, right? I want to feel good. And everything I'm doing is in order to feel good. And I do not want to feel discomfort. And I definitely do not want to feel suffering. I want to feel good. This is what motivates us during the day. And this is an automatic pilot, you know, so even if you don't think, this happens automatically. Sometimes you find yourself getting up and walking towards making yourself a cup of tea, you know? You're not even aware that you're doing it. Your attachment is just impelling you to do it. The automatic pilot that we have, you know, that is what drives us through life, is focused on, I want to feel good and I do not want to feel discomfort. So we all know what kind of actions we do under the influence of the disturbing emotions, right? So if you want to change that, you need to bring awareness to the present moment and see what actions I'm actually doing. So you need to bring more, have less on the automatic pilot and more awareness to your actions in the present moment. The feelings that we have, following the feelings, is very emotional. And according to Buddhism, feelings are a result of previous actions. And so we are after results of previous actions. But if we really want to be creating causes for happiness, if we really want to be happy again and again and again, we have to create the causes. And the causes for feeling happy are our actions. So if we could bring our focus more from how we feel, and I want to feel good, to how am I acting? What is my motivation? How can I make that a positive motivation? Not just about me, not just a self-centered motivation, but how can I make it a motivation that so that my actions become of benefit to others? How can I make sure that I don't harm others with my actions? So bringing the awareness from I want to feel good to what kind of actions am I engaging in? And I think that is a very difficult one for us because we are so used to do things on the automatic pilot, you know. And I think the mindfulness practice is very useful for this, bringing the mind to the present moment again and again and again, and then checking your actions. So not just bringing your mind to the present moment, that's just a condition that helps us to bring the mind to where we are right now. And so actions are done in the present moment. So we need to wake up to the present moment and then be conscious how we engage in actions. So happiness does not come up from outside. It doesn't come from the pleasures that we are indulging from. It doesn't come from, you know, the good coffee and the good meal and the nice chat, and the pleasure is not coming from that. Pleasure is coming from the mind. And yes, a good meal can be a condition for happiness to arise in the mind. But the happiness is not coming from the meal itself. Happiness is not coming from the chat. Happiness is not coming from the coffee. Happiness is not coming from the chocolate. Happiness is coming from your mind. You have the karma to experience happiness, independence upon that nice meal, independence upon that nice chat. But it arises in your mind. If other people indulge in the same things as you, they might have a totally different experience because they have different karma. So I think in general we contribute more to the objects and to the persons, you know, where the happiness is coming from, than to our own mind. we don't think, oh, wow, I have the merit to experience this. We don't say that so often. But that is what is actually going on. We have the merit to experience certain things. And when we have the merit, then we experience pleasure and dependence upon certain objects or persons. We don't have the merit, we will not experience that pleasure. So one Lama, I heard that he said, you Westerners are so obsessed with your feelings. He said, if you could focus more on your actions, that would be so beneficial. Because instead of thinking, I want to feel good now, you think about how can I do things in a way so that long term, I also going to experience happiness. But you can see when you want to do that, you cannot just do things. You have to bring awareness to your actions. And you need to have some knowledge on what type of actions create the causes for happiness and what is important in my actions. And so then there is another one in terms of we not knowing the nature of conventional reality. In Buddhism, we talk about past and future lives. And so for us, in general, this is the only thing that we know. This is who we are, right? We do not think about, we are actually connected to many, many, many lifetimes. And this life is just one single life, just a small thing in the big picture. For us, it feels like, wow, this life is of most importance. I still feel that. This is the only life I have. This is the only way I exist. I cannot see myself. Sometimes I visualize myself in another body, but it's hard. My automatic mind is, this is just who I am. And I do not think, well, I'm going to die, and then I'm going to take another body, and I might look very different, and I might have very different experiences. Right? We cannot see past and future lives. We don't have a lot of awareness over that. And so that makes that we're very focused in the moment on this life. And so you can already feel this life, this self-grasping mind and the self-cherishing mind is immediately triggered. If, for me, thinking about past and future lives is normal, then I can think, even in this life, I do not have so much suffering and so much happiness. I can create the causes for happiness in my future lives, and I can be happy with that. Tibetans are happy with that. Many people in the East are happy with that. That's good enough. But for us, if it feels this is my only life, and you experience a lot of suffering, oh my gosh, then that's it. So then the urge to find pleasure, the urge to find happiness is much bigger. I need to find it in this life. So having it as the perspective of more lives can make us actually more relaxed about finding happiness or not. We can say, wow, this is just one in so many lifetimes. And so now I'm born as a human being, which means that I can use this human lifetime in order to create causes for happiness in the future. I've met the Dharma. I can use this life in order to study the Dharma. I can use this life in order to make imprints. Even if I do not understand everything from the Dharma, I can make imprints. And then in the next lives, they can ripen. And so if I really have a sense of next life, then whatever I'm doing now for the benefit of next life becomes very precious, you know, and I can really appreciate that. Even if I do small things, I know that one day it's going to ripen in something beautiful. So then even my small actions I can appreciate. And then when bad things happen, I can think, you know, well, you know, this is just one lifetime. Sometimes you have good lives, sometimes you have bad lives. You know, sometimes we have lives in which a lot of negative karma from the past ripens. We have to experience it somewhere. So this is what we all can do in order to look differently, have different perspective with respect to ultimate reality, with respect to conventional reality. And the more we think about how things appear to us and then how they exist in actuality and what that means for our actions, you know, the more we develop that wisdom aspect of the mind. And wisdom is like a light. The more wisdom we have, the more that light in the mind starts shining. The more we can see things more clearly. And the Buddha said that, you know, that, or sometimes I'm not sure if the Buddha said that, but when we listen to the teachings, then we can hear the teacher say that all the teachings that the Buddha gave, you know, the motivation of the Buddha was great compassion. And so what the Buddha wanted, he wanted that all sentient beings become free from suffering. And what is really bringing freedom from suffering? When do we develop a state of mind that is free of all suffering? And that is when we realize the ultimate nature of the mind, when we realize emptiness. And emptiness depends upon our wisdom mind. So the wisdom mind is really what is going to help us to counteract unpleasant experiences. Our wisdom mind is the one who is going to analyze our mind and who's going to apply antidotes to our delusions. Right? We need a sharp, clever mind. And it is when we contemplate the nature of how things exist, it is the truth, once we really understand the truth, that causes elimination of suffering. So there is, sometimes they say the reason why the Buddha taught what he taught, everything is all so that eventually we all understand the nature of reality. Because only that will set us free, will totally free us from all suffering. And that is the intent of the Buddha. So that's the wisdom mind. And so under the influence of that wisdom mind, that is the wisdom mind. Under the influence of our delusions, so when the wisdom is not there, when we are in the mind of ignorance, you know, the most core, the core of all that is what we call the self-grasping mind. Holding the self to exist in a way, and to exist in the way it appears to us, while in actuality it doesn't exist like that. So all the things that we talked about, they will all help you to lessen that self-grasping mind. That self-grasping mind that is the root of all your suffering. Whether you think about impermanence, whether you think about dependent arising, whether you think about karma, whether you think about, creating, instead of following my feelings, I'm going to engage in positive actions. They all lessen your self-grasping mind. And so when the self-grasping mind lessens, then also less delusions arise. And when less delusions arise, you have more space in your mind to contemplate the nature of reality. And so instead of winding ourselves up and becoming more tight and more caught up in our delusions, what we're going to do is we're going to undo that. So that is an important thing that we need in order to find happiness. And then we can, normally we have the self-grasping mind, which is the belief how I exist. And in actuality, I do not exist like that. And then dependence on that I, that feeling of self. I have also the notion that self is more important than anybody else's self. My suffering is more important or worse than anybody else. My happiness is more important. First I have to do mine, then I'll take care of you. That is the self-cherishing mind. And in order to, the self-cherishing mind is say that is actually, besides the self-grasping mind, but the self-cherishing mind is what makes us so unhappy. They say that all the suffering is coming from the self-cherishing mind, putting yourself before others, putting your happiness before others. So in order to change that, in order to create or find the ingredients that are going to help us to create more happiness, we change that self-cherishing mind into a mind that is cherishing others. Cherishing others means having compassion for others. Wishing others to be free from suffering. And we all have a certain level of compassion, right? Solinus always talks about the mother, and when the mother is nourishing the child, that is coming from compassion. And from that nourishing, the child learns about compassion, or maybe the inner potential of the child for compassion gets nourished and opened up. So we all have that. But at the moment, our compassion is biased. So if compassion is the wish to be free from suffering, we can see that we wish that for ourselves. We wish that for everyone that we love, everyone that we like. We wish that for people that we experience, maybe not. We wish that for those we love and like. Let me leave it like that. Then compassion for strangers. Sometimes we have compassion for strangers, right? We hear stories that are so gruesome that we think, oh my gosh, and you wish that person sincerely to be free from suffering. But often, when we don't know the stories, when we don't hear about it, we do not have a specific wish for others that we do not know to be free from suffering. We just don't think about it. And then there is a whole group of people that we maybe don't like so much, or don't like at all, or have big problems with. For them, it's very difficult for us to wish them to be free from suffering. And if somebody really has hurt us, we might actually generate the wish for them to suffer. Right? That's the opposite of compassion. So our mind is at the moment biased. We do have compassion, but the compassion only arises in dependence on those that we like and don't like. And I'm saying it a little bit black and white, but just try to get the meaning. We have compassion for those that we like and love. And if we look into what it means, we like you, or what it means, I love you, you know. For us, with our biased mind, love and liking means I experience benefit from you. You are benefiting me. Therefore, I want you to be happy too. And I do not want you to suffer. But the moment you stop benefiting me, and instead you start harming me, my wish for you to be happy and free of suffering can also change like that. Which means that my wish for you to be free of suffering, which is my compassion, is actually all about how much you do for me. You know, this is, and I'm not saying this is for everyone in all circumstances, especially if you are a good practitioner, you might already have, you know, developed a mind that is less biased. But if you have no practice at all, and you have never heard of these teachings, and then in general, if people start hurting us, there is no wish in our mind anymore for them to be free of suffering. And so at the moment, our compassion is biased and depends upon what somebody else is doing for us. So what we're trying to do in Buddhism, we can see that, you know, it is quite a limited attitude of compassion that we have. And if we check, then when compassion arises in the mind, how do we feel? We feel happy, right? Compassion is a beautiful feeling to feel for us, but also for the person that we feel it towards. So what if we could develop that mind for each and every sentient being? What if we somehow find a way that equanimity, that lack of equanimity, that biased mind would transform into a mind that is equanimous towards everyone. A mind that is not just having the preference and saying, I like you, but I don't like you. But instead of that, we have a mind that says, I can see that you all have your needs. I can see that you all want to be happy. I can see that you all want to be free of suffering. And for me, there is no difference between one person and another person. You know, because your need is all the same. And I'm going to work from your perspective. I'm going to work for your need for happiness, for your need to be free of suffering. And it's not anymore about me. I like you, therefore I give you what you want. But I don't like you, so I'm not going to give you what you want. No, you have a need for something, I give it to you. You have a need, I give it to you. You all have the same need. And so in order to generate that mind, you know, when we start doing that, we think that is insane. Why would I gonna love or why would I do the things for the people that I don't like, who have hurt me a lot? Why? You know. So we need to apply reasoning. The mind that is sincerely wishing others, and others means more than just the people that you like, to be free of suffering, is a mind based on reasoning. Right? We cannot just do that from a good heart. There are certain people, they have the capacity to benefit many beings, you know. But in order to keep doing that, and in order to then extend the heart even further, we do need to apply reasoning. And so the reasoning that we can apply is, one of them is, for instance, that we look into relationships. How, and I think I already just mentioned that, how they're all focused around my benefit. But then what we can see is, well, relationships, they change all the time. You know, you're my friend today, but 3 years ago, I didn't know you. You were a stranger to me. And maybe in past lives, we were enemies. We don't know. Or maybe in the future, something is going to happen with our relationship and it changes. It can happen. And so whether you are close to me at the moment doesn't mean you're always going to be close to me. Being distant to me at the moment doesn't mean you're always going to be distant to me. There have been actually many moments in past lives where you were very close to me, but I forgot about that. So we're going to look into the changeability, how relationships change due to causes and conditions, due to karma. And who is my friend today might be my enemy tomorrow. But it doesn't change the fact that that other person wants to be happy and wants to be free of suffering. And so if I can see that instead of thinking, we are different, if I can see we're all the same, we all want the same thing. We all want to be happy. We all want to be free of suffering. Therefore, you're the same as me. You're the same as me. Everyone is the same as me. And for me, just working for me, I'm working only for one person. Why not starting to work for all the other persons? Why do I think me is so important? While I can work for everybody else. And so in order to really generate a mind like that, Buddhism uses, different reasonings, and maybe that's too much maybe tomorrow I can say a little bit about that. But you go into the 7 cause and effect reasoning, that all sentient beings have been your mothers and that they all have been kind to you. And so reflecting on the kindness of others is a very good tool in order to generate the mind that wishes others to be happy. If you can see the other person as kind to you, you want to repay that kindness naturally. So if you have trouble with people, try to think about, they have been kind to me. Where have they been kind to me and how? And kindness doesn't necessarily mean an act of kindness from their side. But kindness can also mean that due to a certain person have been in an extremely difficult situation and it was very unpleasant, but I worked through that and now I come out the other end. And with me, I have learned how to be patient. I have learned how to deal with negative emotions. I've learned so much. My wisdom has grown so much. Now I understand others so much better. Wow, I received so much. I learned so much in dependence upon that experience, that negative experience with that person. And I can actually see that as a kindness. Because without that experience, I would never have developed these qualities. Right? In that way, people can also be kind. So you have to flip a little bit with the word kindness. Kindness does not mean people give us what we want. Sometimes the best act of kindness is when they don't give us what we want. But you have to maybe sit with that one a little bit. So changing relationships in what can you do for me to what can I do for you? The more we can do that, what can I do for you? The more we strengthen our compassion. And so these are the main tools that we have in Buddhism. And we can learn about the tools. Just as that we want to have the good ingredients in the cake or in the meal, we want to have the good ingredients, the tools, in order to work with our mind. And so once we have the ingredients, we have knowledge about them, and we have tried them, then we have to see that how do I gonna make from all these, like I have the tools to become happy, but how do I change that, or how do I use that to create an art of happiness for myself? Because there are certain situations that one tool works really well and another tool is not doing it for you at the moment. How do you know that? And how do you know which tool to use at what moment? And I think in order to know that, we need to really know our own mind. And so in order to know our own mind, what we do in Buddhism is we meditate, not just in Buddhism, it's many, many traditions. You meditate. You are alone with yourself. You are with yourself, connected to yourself, and see what is going on inside. What is going on in your mind? How are you feeling? How are you reacting? And when we start looking at ourselves, we have to make sure that we look at ourselves without any judgment, fully accepting what we see. Right? Like we go to the doctor and we say, I'm feeling, you know, and even if you feel really shitty, and you should be able to feel free that you can express without being judged, without being belittled, without being laughed at. So that's how you have, what you have to do with yourself as well. You know, look at your own mind and say, wow, you know, you're in a big mess, but it's okay. You know, there are many reasons why you are feeling what you're feeling, why you are reacting the way that you are reacting. So sit with yourself. Connect with yourself, where you are right now. See yourself as you are right now. Don't make it any more beautiful. Don't pretend. Don't expect yourself to be different than you are. And then be with yourself with the wish for you to be free of that suffering, with the wish for you to be happy, you know, loving kindness, gentleness. And so that connection, you can, when you nourish that in the meditation, then out of the meditation, you can stay connected with yourself as well. Checking in with yourself. Because things, you know, things do not happen so often in meditation. They normally happen outside of the meditation. And so you have all your tools, but then in order to apply them, you need to feel connected with yourself outside of the meditation as well. Stay alert. Stay mindful. And then see, you know, where is your affinity? Some people, they are really, you know, people from the heart, and they like to start with, I want to open my heart. I want to open my heart, you know. That's fantastic. But don't forget the whole wisdom aspect. Also look at the nature of reality, because that will guarantee you that you can keep going for a much longer period of time. And other people, they feel more, you know, they like the reason mind. They feel more, you know, science is more my type of thing. So they go more into the emptiness, which is fantastic. But don't forget to open heart, because that is what is really going to help you to get away from your self-centered attitude. But do what suits you best, you know, without losing the whole. And I think You know, the art of happiness, what I've learned most in my life, having received Buddhist teachings, is how to relate to ourselves, especially when we don't feel so happy. You know, we're often hard on ourselves. We are judgmental. Or many of us have a stick, you know, when something doesn't go right, we start beating ourselves up. And that causes actually so much suffering. And so being with unpleasant experiences, many of us do not know how to do that. Learning how to be with yourself when you feel something, when you feel hurt, when you feel grief, when you feel disappointment, when you feel disturbed, how to be with yourself in a kind, non-judgmental, gentle way. Talking to yourself in a kind way. You know, oh, this is just disappointment. It's okay. You know, you tried your very best. Next time better. You never know when your karma ripens, right? We do not have to blame ourselves for our mistakes. Mistakes happen due to many causes and conditions. We don't have to blame ourselves for anything. We try. If you know that you're trying your very best, what else is there to be done? What more can you do than your very best? So then if things do not work out, why beating yourself up? You know? Or if you are, you know, some people have that also as an automatic pilot, that they talk to themselves in a quite harsh way. Maybe investigate that self-talk. How is your self-talk? And how can you do that differently? And if you find some harsh self-talk, you could say, would you ever talk to your best friend like that? And then you say, I would never talk to anyone like that. Right? Not even if it's not your best friend, not even if it is a stranger. You do not talk to people like that, but we do talk to ourselves like that. So start talking to yourself as if you are your best friend. And so if we create a nice relationship with ourselves, you know, then in dependence on that, the relationships with others will come. They will develop in a similar way. When we're more gentle on ourselves, we will be more gentle on others. When we have less expectations of ourselves, we will be more happy with whatever the other person is contributing. We have less expectations of them. And so whatever we experience, you know, we can remember, I'm not the only one. There's so many people experiencing something similar. And you can even think there's so many people who experience much worse than me. You know, we actually have such good lives. And yes, we sometimes are lonely. Yes, we can feel not satisfied. Yes, we can feel frustrated. Yes, we can feel all that. But then if we look in general to our life, you know, there's so many people, similar experiences than us. But then we have so many good attributes to our lives that others do not have. So change your focus a little bit. And then one more thing that we can do is when things happen to us that we do not like, you know, instead of, I do not want to know about this, or I want to separate from that, we could say, what can I learn from this? Or how can this experience benefit me? And by changing our perspective, we will change our reaction. Right? Instead of that we keep repeating, oh, I don't want that, and it was really unpleasant, and I didn't like it, and we change perspective and say, wow, what an opportunity. What can I do with that? How can I use this in order to develop my potential for wisdom and compassion? And the more we can say yes to things, you know, and yes to ourselves, and yes to whatever arises in our mind. Yes, in the sense that, not that we act it out, but yes, that we allow it to arise. And then that we look at it and see what we're going to do with it. I think that will all help to be more happy. Shall we do some questions? I don't know how we're going to do that. So if people have questions, they can either type it in or they can put up their hands. I'm not sure if I see everyone. And then I could unmute you, but if you type it, I can read it out to everyone. Or if there are questions in the Gompa, then Judy, you could unmute yourself and questions. You have to unmute, Judy. Judy, you have to unmute.
Hello there.
Yes, thank you.
You talked about having a sense of future lives and for us to create imprints. Lama Zopa uses mantras a lot.
Uh-huh.
I don't fully get how they work.
Okay.
I was just wondering if you could give your view on that.
On mantras.
And how they create imprints and how they work for future lives. And
okay, so mantras work in the present moment, and mantras can work for future lives. What works for future lives is whatever you habituate yourself with in this life will create imprints for future lives. Right? Actually, everything that we are doing will create imprints for future lives. But if you want to have imprints that are going to ripen into happiness, you want to have positive imprints, and mantras are a positive energy. And so when you habit yourself with mantras, when you repeat them over and over again, you create the habit of reciting mantras, which means that in next life, you most likely will come into contact again with the same kind of teachings, with the same kind of mantras. So what we are doing in this life will show up somehow in next lives. And you can see that with little kids, you know. There are kids that are born, they're born with a lot of compassion. They won't hurt any little animal. They're careful with each and every sentient being. And there are also children that from the beginning, they like to almost torture, you know, pull the legs of the insects, burn them, and then have pleasure by seeing the suffering. So this is coming from habit. So when we recite mantras, and we recite them often, that creates a habit which will continue in the next lives. And then in this life, if we talk about mantras, then we, you know, in Buddhism we talk about 3 different levels of mind. One is the coarse mind, and that is the mind of the sense organs, and it is the mind of the coarse thinking. And then there is a subtle mind, and that subtle mind is the mind that helps to connect that subtle mind is the mind that can connect to the subtle wind body that we also have with our channels, with our chakras. I don't know if you have heard of that. And when we start reciting mantras that will have an effect on that more subtle level. I sometimes have the feeling that mantras, they are like a kind of a subtle massage that is given to the chakras, to the more subtle energies in the body. And when we work on that subtle level, that has a pacifying effect on the more coarse level. So I would say there are two results of doing mantras. You know, one is in this life. It is already very beneficial because it helps you to connect the subtle mind with the subtle body. And the more we do that, the more we feel in control, the more we feel connected with really who I am. You know, that superficial life that is just about the senses, that changes, that becomes less important because I get a quality due to that connection of the subtle body and the subtle mind. That is much more important than, you know, the more superficial experiences of life. Is that right? Can you do something with that? Okay. All right. No questions in the chat. Does anybody else have a question? Good, thank you. Was everything clear? Okay, somebody says, can you give an example of mantra? So, for instance, Om Mani Padme Hum is the mantra of Chenrezig Buddha, and which just really helps us to open the heart. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, and it is a mantra mantra is Sanskrit. It's coming from the Sanskrit, and the Tibetans have adjusted that a little bit. The Sanskrit language is a very old language, and they say that, you know, it's coming straight from the gods. And so when you recite words in Sanskrit, it is very good to know the meaning, because that is important for your rational mind to understand what you're doing. But then at the same time, that Sanskrit that resonates with that subtle mind and that subtle body in a way that it is very effective. And so there is the Chenrezig mantra, you have Medicine Buddha mantra, you have Tara mantra. Every deity, every god in Buddhism has its own mantra. So there are many, many different mantras that you can use. Thank you so much. Hi, Anita. It's nice to see you here. Okay, it's lovely to see all of you here. And maybe we leave it here for tonight.
Thank you.
Take care, and I hope to see you then. Bye-bye.